Hey everyone, Shin here. So I wanted to do another top 10 tips video similar to the one I did a while back for new Guild Wars 2 players, but this time have it be focused more around something at level 80. And as a big fan of roaming in World v World, I figured I would make a tips video for people who may not be familiar with roaming, but would be interested in kind of getting into it. For those who aren't familiar with what exactly World v World roaming is, it's basically breaking off from the large group of players running around taking keeps, castles, towers, etc., and doing more small group or individual type actions like fighting other roaming players or taking down supply camps, flipping sentries, things of that nature, things of a smaller scope than the larger group activities in World v World. And so, without further ado, these are my top 10 tips for new World v World roamers in Guild Wars 2. Starting off at tip number 10 is to become familiar with the Borderlands map, the Eternal Battlegrounds map, and the Edge of the Mist map, as well as all of the structures that are in those maps. This tip is number 10 not so much because it's not important or has little importance compared to the others, but more so because for the next few tips it serves as a foundation for what you're going to be doing in those maps or what those tips are focused around. Just like in PvE or any other game mode like SPVP, it's a good idea to become familiar with your environment because you're going to need to use that environment to your advantage in a lot of situations. You're going to need to be able to find your way around, get to certain places, find routes you like to travel upon. You just need to figure out what your options are when it comes to your environment and become familiar with what is in that environment. Tip number 9 is to learn where the hotspots of activity on each map are. This is important for two reasons. One, it allows you to figure out where the large forces of each server or the, quote, Zergs typically travel and allows you to avoid those areas either because a Zerg is going to make any fight you have with anyone else, any other roamers, completely unfair, or you will be completely run over by an enemy group and you will have to run back from your spawning waypoint. The other reason is these areas may have a lot of other roamers, which is good for either going somewhere where you wanted to fight someone, or cutting off other roamers from taking down one of your supply camps, or just in general being strategic with how you roam. Becoming familiar with these hotspots is important because it allows you to tailor your roaming path around what's happening on the map, or what will happen on the map. Tip number 8 is actually based off of the advice from tips number 9 and 10, in that you want to figure out a route that you want to take when you are on each map. This allows you to get a path down for taking camps, sentries, finding other players to fight, avoiding the large forces. It's just a way to more easily streamline your roaming and make yourself more effective in each map. However, you should also travel off of these paths periodically because you may find fights that you weren't expecting, or you may be able to intercept other roamers, or you may be able to save or take an objective that you don't normally interact with. And by doing so, you make yourself more valuable as a roamer in general. Tip number 7 is to attack Doliacs, supply camps, and sentries while you're out roaming. There's a common misconception that roamers are only out to kill other players and don't help the server as a whole, thereby wasting a slot in the World v World maps. While there are some roamers who do just this and they only attack other players, roamers who want to make the most of their time and their server's time in these maps will not only attack other roamers, but they will also take down these objectives. The reason why it's important to take down Doliacs and supply camps is because it starves your opponents of the supplies they need to repair keeps, castles, build defending siege, or get the supplies they need to assault one of your objectives. And with supply camps, it also flips the supply camp in your server's favor, thereby providing your server with the aforementioned supplies for any of the aforementioned tasks. Killing sentries is important because not only do they add points directly to your server's score whenever they're killed, but they also act as obstacles and delays while your Doliacs are getting from point to point, meaning that if you kill them, that removes that obstacle and your Doliacs can get to their objective more quickly. Once you've killed a sentry, it will respawn under your server's control, meaning it will act as that same obstacle to your opponent's Doliacs and allow yourself or other roamers more time to catch up to the Doliacs and kill them before they get to where they're going. Also keep in mind that when roaming, you'll want to make it a point to avoid the larger objectives like keeps and castles, simply because alone or in a small group, they are very hard to assault, very hard to take with that small group, and are often the targets of the larger groups. Thereby, they're usually defended very quickly, or your own server is going to take care of it anyway. Your time is better spent assaulting smaller objectives, such as the camps and the Dolyaks. Now, you might be wondering, what about towers? Towers are a structure that can be taken by either large groups or roaming groups, provided they're big enough. These are structures that you want to be very cautious with, in that if they are upgraded or heavily defended, you want to steer clear of them. However, if they haven't been upgraded yet, or you have a large enough roaming group, say around 5 people, you can try your hand at taking one of these towers down, provided you have the siege you need, and you can do it quickly enough to take the tower before an enemy group shows up to defend it. Tip number 6 is to find a character build that works well for your playstyle, but also incorporates many of the aspects that are important to roaming in World v. World. Since you are fighting other players, a lot of the aspects of just general PvP do come into play, such as having things like stun breaks or condition removal, but one of the more important things that you'll find when it comes to World v. World roaming, as opposed to, say, structured PvP or large group siege warfare, is the importance of mobility. There are a lot of situations that will come up when roaming where you are going to want to leave a battle or leave an area because otherwise you'll be at a major disadvantage or you will die. Examples being a large group comes tearing through the area you're fighting in, and if you don't get out of the way in time, you'll get run over. Or maybe you're fighting another roamer and they have 2 of their friends show up and you're in a situation where you know you can't win. Things like this make having mobility important in a build because it allows you to, if anything, get out of a fight, reset it, and then reconsider or reanalyze what the situation is, and then come back with a different strategy. One thing to keep in mind when building your character for roaming is the added flexibility that utility buffs and food buffs provide you, as well as the fact that armor stats are not as set and fixed as they are with the amulets in structured PvP. With the addition of these 2 extra pieces that you can move around, you can make your character do things that it otherwise wouldn't be able to in, say, structured PvP. For example, a warrior running a certain set of runes, plus a certain trait, plus a certain food buff, is able to effectively become immune to all forms of snares, be them cripple, chill, or immobilize. This is an incredibly powerful tool made available to warriors running this setup because it allows them to stick on targets better, or it prevents them from running into an obstacle that they would otherwise have to deal with in structured PvP, and completely changes how that warrior is able to function in World v. World. Feel free to experiment. Since you have so many things in these builds that you can change and mess around with, feel free to try a consumable that you never would have considered with a certain rune set or any number of things. You have a lot of flexibility when it comes to creating a character build for World v. World, and the more you experiment and the more you test, the more builds you'll find that you'll like, or maybe you'll learn more about how certain traits or mechanics work for your class. And in a lot of cases, experimentation can yield very good results, very good builds. A lot of common roaming builds came about because players wanted to experiment and they wanted to break away from what a lot of other people were using. At the same time, if you are not as inclined to experimentation, or you just want to grab a build and go, and you're more interested in the actual fighting and you don't want to think about it as much, feel free to ask other roamers or check build resource websites. There are a lot of very good roaming builds already out there for you to pick up and try if you're so inclined. Tip number 5 is to simply be ready for the wide variety of builds you're going to be running up against when roaming in World v. World. Everything you have at your disposal when building your character, your opponents do as well. So you're going to be running into a wide variety of builds that will either completely counter your build and be impossible for you to kill, or maybe completely rolled over by your build simply because your strengths directly hit their weaknesses and they can't do anything to stop you. It's one of those situations where you have to expect the unexpected and be ready to react accordingly. Tip number 4 is to use the environment around you to your advantage. This could be anything from ducking behind a wall or off a ledge to break line of sight. It could be tricking your opponent into cleaving a nearby veteran monster who will then start attacking them. It could even be jumping down a secret passageway and getting out of line of sight so your opponent can't see you anymore. You want to learn the areas of each map where these affordances are present, and you want to learn how to use them to your advantage. This is one of the reasons why I mentioned in tip 10 to become familiar with the layouts of each map and the structures of each map, because there are a lot of situations, a lot of areas that have these secret passages or ledges that allow you to gain an advantage over your opponent where there otherwise wouldn't be one. Tip number 3 is to simply practice. A lot of the success in roaming comes down to how well you know the area you're fighting in, how well you know what types of builds your opponents may bring to the table, how well you know your own build when roaming. A lot of it just comes down to experience, and the only way to gain that experience is to practice. I would have rated this tip higher on the list, but I feel the next 2 tips are slightly more important than this one. That being said, practicing is one of the best things you can do for yourself as a new roamer. Tip number 2 is to always keep in mind that the fighting in Rova World is by no means balanced. By simple virtue of the fact that the numbers are tuned differently than structured PvP, and the fact that you have consumable buffs, and the stats on armor is piece by piece and more customizable than just the amulets in structured PvP, you're going to run into a lot of situations where there are combinations that work a lot better in World v. World roaming, so much so that they give a much bigger advantage than they would in structured PvP. You also have to remember that certain classes, because of the mobility emphasis, will have an advantage moving around the map or getting out of combat and then being able to come back after they've reset the fight. There are just a lot of factors that prevent the roaming scene in World v. World from being balanced like it is in structured PvP. And my number 1 tip for new roaming players in World v. World: don't take roaming too seriously. Roaming in World v. World is one of those activities that players have come up with on their own time or have figured that's how they want to play, not because of any rewards or any specific boosts or anything. It's simply just something they enjoy doing. And part of that enjoyment comes from not caring about dying from large groups coming and stomping you or getting outnumbered or things of that nature. Yeah, there will inevitably be a few situations where you're like, oh, I wish that didn't happen, oh, that's dumb, that build is cheesy, etc, etc. But overall, it's a good idea to just look at roaming as something fun to do when you want to do it, not as something that you are working towards any specific goal or that you're going to be judged on or you're going to be looked at as super competitive or anything. It's just there to have fun with. It's just there for you to spend time in the way you want to with. There will always be situations when roaming World v. World that are completely unexpected or go a way that you completely didn't plan for. And for some players, that's even the draw. It's just the fact that every experience is unique and things change and every encounter is different. I know that's what one of the draws for me is just the fact that when I go roaming, I don't know what to expect. And I have a lot of fun just seeing what happens, seeing what comes of me fighting other players or disrupting a siege attempt or whatever. It's just there to have fun with. And taking it too seriously or getting too frustrated over it can be a detriment to your experience. So again, just take a step back when you're roaming. Don't think about it too hard. Don't worry about people judging you over being super pro or being super bad. Just go out there, run around, have fun, do what you want. Roaming is your time, and you decide how you want to go about spending that time. And with that, those are my top 10 tips for new World v. World roamers in Guild Wars 2. Hopefully you enjoyed the video, found it useful. Maybe you were even a veteran roamer who got some use out of it. Feel free to leave a comment below the video, give it a like if you did enjoy it. If you really want, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. And other than that, I will see you around the stream or in the next video. Take care, everyone.